Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. It all began on a Monday. I almost skipped. You know the type. Gloomy weather, socks sticking to the floor, your lunch leaks in the bag. I had one goal: to buy laundry detergent and avoid burning dinner for once. But fate or whatever had other plans. I was standing in the checkout line at Randall's, holding the cheapest detergent I could find, scrolling through my emails when her message popped up like a slap to the chest. "We're just having dinner with him." "Don't worry, smiley face." There was no context, no follow-up, just that one line with that infuriating smiley face. "Her name is Lana. We've been married 12 years. She used to call me her cozy place. Now she calls me too predictable. And my name Marshall, 41. Underpaid, overloyal, and apparently very good at ignoring obvious signs like her suddenly dressing better for errands or locking her phone with a new passcode after a software update. But this was a new level dinner with him. Who the hell is him? I stood frozen in the checkout line while some teenager behind me sighed because I wasn't moving fast enough. I paid for the detergent but left the store without it. My mind was already unraveling like a loose thread on a cheap sweater. I got in my car and stared at my phone. Not at the message, but at the pattern. How many late meetings had there been lately? How many weekends did she need to breathe away at her sister's cabin? Then I remembered something even more chilling. Just 2 nights ago, she laughed in her sleep and mumbled, "No, don't. He might hear us." I thought it was a dream. Now it felt like a replay. Still, I didn't reply. I just drove, not home. I parked in the same place she always tells me not to, near the Overlook where we used to drink gas station wine and talk about baby names we never used. I stared out at the skyline for a while, fingers numb, wondering how long she'd been slipping away while I was busy reheating leftovers and asking her about her day. Then I texted her back. "Divorce papers are already filed. What's there to worry about?" I hadn't filed anything, but I needed to see how she'd react. And oh, she did. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then again, then nothing. 30 minutes later, she called. I let it ring. Then I got a text. "Marshall, what are you talking about?" "This is just Denny from my department. We're all here." "What are you even saying?" "Right, Denny?" The same guy who texted her, "See you tonight," winking face last week. The guy whose name she once saved as Danielle in her contacts. But the worst part, she had just lied boldly instantly because while she said, "We're all here," her location tag was still on. And she was in a cozy little Italian restaurant with only 2 people seated at her table. I zoomed in. 1 man, 1 woman, 1 light too many. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even turn the car off. I just sat there, hands shaking in my lap, staring at the tiny blue dot on the map that confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't just having dinner. She was somewhere I hadn't been invited, with someone she didn't name, doing something she didn't want me to see. So I drove there, not in a blaze of rage, not with dramatic music playing like in some breakup montage. I just drove like I was going to the store, like I had to return something I never meant to buy. My trust. The restaurant was too fancy for casual dinner. I'd never even been inside. She always said it was too expensive for us, so we were saving. Said that money was tight. So imagine me in sweatpants and a crumpled hoodie peeking through the tinted front windows of Aiello, watching my wife laugh over wine with a man I didn't recognize. They weren't sitting across from each other. They were on the same side of the booth. Her body was angled toward him. Her head tilted in that way she used to tilt it when I told a bad joke, but she pretended it was charming. He leaned in and touched her wrist. Not by accident, not as a joke, like he'd done it 100 times before. I don't remember getting out of the car. I don't even remember walking across the parking lot. But I do remember standing just feet from the entrance, frozen by the side of my wedding ring hanging on a thin chain around her neck. She never wore it like that. Not once. Not in 12 years. I bought that ring. I picked it, and now it was being shown off like a trophy to a man who clearly wasn't her husband. That's when she looked up. Our eyes met for a split second through the window. Her smile faltered. She said something to him quickly. He didn't look back. She grabbed her phone. I knew what was coming. Sure enough, it buzzed a second later. "Marshall, please don't do this." But I already had. I didn't walk in. I didn't scream. I didn't demand answers. I just stood there watching the woman I vowed to grow old with. Look at another man like he was the only one who ever mattered. And the worst part, I think she believed I'd just go home, pretend I hadn't seen anything. Like always. She sent another text. Please go home. I'll explain everything. You're overreacting. Overreacting? That word hit harder than the betrayal. As if catching your wife having an intimate dinner with another man, lying to your face, hiding her ring, and gaslighting you through a message somehow wasn't enough to warrant a reaction. I stayed just far enough that they wouldn't notice me again. I watched them eat, talk, laugh. At one point, she leaned over and wiped something off his lip with her napkin. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach twist. This wasn't new. The body language, the comfort, the intimacy. This wasn't a fling. This was practiced, rehearsed, familiar. He knew her little cues. She knew how he liked his steak. When he cracked a joke, she didn't laugh like someone being polite. She laughed like someone who had heard it before and still loved it. I thought about walking in with my phone camera recording. I thought about shouting her name, making a scene, forcing her mask to drop. But that's not who I am. I don't know how to rage. I know how to sink quietly internally. So instead, I took a picture. One single photo through the glass, her smiling at him, his hand on hers, the ring around her neck glinting in the light. Then I went home, and here's the part that really gets me. When she walked through the door 2 hours later, she acted like nothing happened. She tossed her purse on the table, kicked off her heels, and called out, "Hey babe, you up?" Babe. That word used to make me feel lucky. Now it sounded like spit in my face. I sat on the couch holding the photo up on my phone. She froze in the hallway when she saw it. "Marshall," she whispered, "it's not what you think." And that was the moment I finally said something I'd rehearsed for years but never believed I'd say aloud. "No, Lana, it's exactly what I think." She stood in the hallway like a child caught stealing. Her shoulders hunched, her eyes scanning the room for the right angle. She didn't rush to me. She didn't cry. She just stood there calculating. I didn't say a word. I just kept staring at the photo on my screen, letting the silence stretch so far it started to hum in my ears. "I know what it looks like," she finally said. That phrase, that pathetic phrase that always means exactly what it looks like. "His name is Darren," she continued like I'd asked. "He's a friend, just a friend. I knew you'd take it the wrong way." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt like the only thing I could do to keep from screaming. "You mean the Darren whose hand was on yours for 2 hours straight?" "That Darren." She flinched, but only for a second. Then she crossed her arms like I was the one on trial. "You've been distant for months, Marshall. You barely notice me anymore. Everything is always about your stress, your work, your sleep schedule. So your solution was to hold hands with Darren in a restaurant you told me we couldn't afford." That shut her up for a second. Then she said the thing I'll never forget. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was so dull, so rehearsed, so cowardly. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stood up slowly. "So how far did you mean for it to go, Lana?" She didn't answer. And you know what? I didn't push. I didn't want details. I didn't want timelines or excuses or emotionally manipulative tears. I'd spent so long carrying the blame for things I didn't do that I almost expected her to say it was my fault she cheated. Instead, she just sat down on the edge of the couch like this was a normal night and said, "Can we talk like adults?" "Adults," I repeated, stunned. "Adults don't hide their rings. Adults don't lie about where they are. Adults don't sneak around and then ask for calm after they've detonated everything." But the worst part, she looked bored, not guilty, not scared, just tired. Like she was already 10 steps ahead, planning her next sentence, her next play, her next manipulation. That's when I realized I was never her partner. I was just her audience. The silence between us that night wasn't peaceful. It wasn't thoughtful. It was the kind of silence that makes you realize just how far apart two people can be while sitting in the same room. She crossed her legs like she was about to deliver a TED talk and said, "Marshall, I think we both know things haven't been working for a while." That sentence, that casually cruel sentence, like we were talking about an old fridge that wouldn't cool milk anymore. I just nodded, mostly to keep myself from doing something embarrassing, like crying. I've cried more in the last 3 days than I have in the last 10 years combined, but I wasn't about to give her another drop. "You were always so careful," she said, as if it were a flaw. Careful with money, careful with emotions, careful with plants, and I needed something different. Something different, something unpredictable, something not me. She said Darren challenged her, that he made her laugh in ways I didn't anymore, that he listened without interrupting, that he said things like, live a little. She described him like some bohemian guru who came down from the mountains to enlighten her boring little suburban life. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. I just listened and let her talk, because I was starting to realize that nothing she said actually mattered. She wasn't explaining because she wanted me to understand. She was explaining because she wanted to feel better about what she'd already done. But then she dropped the real bomb. He's going through a divorce too, she said. We've been leaning on each other. I laughed again, not because it was funny, but because I finally saw the pattern. She wasn't running to someone brave or exciting. She was running to someone just as broken as her. Someone else who needed attention, praise, validation, just like she did. They weren't building something new. They were hiding inside each other's mess. And then, with a calmness that chilled me to the bone, she said, I'm not sure what I want right now, but I don't want to lose everything just because I got confused. I blinked at her. You mean me? She nodded. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, like gravity was warning me not to rise. I think you already lost me, Lana. You just didn't notice. The next morning, I couldn't sleep. Lana was still in the bedroom pretending like the conversation never happened. She even brewed coffee, set a mug out for me with the same mechanical habit she'd practiced for years. Like that one cup of caffeine was going to erase what I saw with my own eyes. I didn't touch it. Instead, I went to the garage looking for a reason to stay out of her way. I told myself I was going to reorganize my old tools as if that would fix anything. But I found something else instead. A shoebox. One I hadn't seen before, stuffed behind the paint cans and under a folded blanket we hadn't used since our last failed camping trip. Curiosity didn't even feel like the right word. It was more instinct, like my gut knew this box wasn't just filled with junk. Inside were printed photos, not digital, not in her phone. Printed as if someone had wanted these memories to be permanent, almost ceremonial. Him and her at restaurants, at a lake. One photo of them in what looked like a hotel mirror with his arm wrapped around her waist from behind while she grinned into the reflection like she was posing for the future. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just emotional cheating. This wasn't just dinner. This was a life she was rehearsing behind my back. There were ticket stubs, notes, a receipt from a jeweler. One of the envelopes had my name scribbled on the outside, but I didn't open it. I couldn't because suddenly I realized this box wasn't for hiding. It was for revealing someday when she was ready. She had been preparing her exit slowly, methodically, and I was the idiot who'd been too busy fixing our leaking sink to notice she was building a second life behind my back. I didn't confront her, not then. I went inside, dropped the box on the kitchen table, and walked back out without a word. Let her see what I'd found. Let her panic for once. I didn't say a word when I left the box on the kitchen table. I wanted her to feel it. The weight of being caught, the panic of secrets no longer protected by silence. I drove around for hours, not really knowing where to go. I parked outside an old diner we used to eat at during our early days. Back when she smiled at me like I was her favorite person and not a background character in her real story. When I got home that night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I half expected her to be gone. Maybe I even hoped for it. That she would pack up her lies and leave before I had to say another word. But no, she was sitting at the kitchen table, the box still unopened in front of her, staring at it like it was ticking. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Didn't speak, just said, "So you found it." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, waiting. "I wasn't going to show you until I was sure," she muttered. "Sure of what?" I asked, though I already knew. "That I wanted to leave," she whispered. "That it was worth it." That sentence, that stupid, hollow sentence, like I was a piece of old furniture. She was debating whether to donate or dump. "You built a secret life," I said, while I was folding your laundry and fixing the garage door. She opened the box slowly, fingers trembling. It wasn't supposed to be a secret. I was just waiting for the right moment. I almost laughed. "You mean a moment where it wouldn't blow up your image? Where I'd stay quiet?" where no one would blame you. And then she did something that knocked the air out of me. She started crying. Not pretty tears, messy, breathless sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep. Like she wasn't crying because she was caught, but because something had finally snapped. I don't know who I am anymore. She choked. I look at you and I feel guilt. I look at him and I feel fake. And I don't even know which version of me is real. I wanted to hate her, I really did. But I stood there frozen because part of me still wanted to fix this. That broken, pathetic part of me that always needed to be needed. But I didn't move. I just whispered, "Maybe you're neither," and walked away. I didn't sleep that night either. But it wasn't the usual anxiety-fueled spiral. It was quiet still, like standing in a burned-out house, breathing in the ash, realizing you've somehow survived the fire. She had cried herself to sleep in the other room. Door shut, the box still open on the table. I didn't go in. I didn't ask if she was okay. For once, I let her sit in the ruin she created. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want some dramatic public exposure or a messy breakup that left us both shredded. I just wanted clarity and peace, so I wrote a letter, not to her, to myself. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't clever. Just a list of truths I had ignored for years. How I shrank myself to keep her from feeling inadequate. How I dismissed red flags because I didn't want to be the jealous type. How I was so afraid of losing her that I never stopped to ask if she had already left me emotionally. Line by line, I wrote it all. Not for closure, but for understanding. Then I packed a bag. Nothing dramatic, just enough for a few nights. I didn't slam doors. I didn't make noise. I left the letter on my pillow and walked out. The air outside felt different. I stayed at a motel on the edge of town that smelled like old carpet and microwave popcorn. And it was perfect. For the first time in what felt like forever, my phone was silent. Not because no one cared, but because I wasn't waiting for her to say something that made it all okay. A week later, I filed for divorce. For real this time, she didn't beg. She didn't scream. She just nodded like she had known this was coming and couldn't stop it. Maybe she was sorry, maybe she wasn't. But that was no longer my burden to carry. I'm not healed. I'm not suddenly whole. But I'm not her shadow anymore. I signed the papers, folded my letter, and finally looked in the mirror without flinching. It turns out peace doesn't come with answers. It comes with letting go of the need for them. Thanks for following this story on the Reddit Confessions channel. Now tell us which moment in Marshall's story hit you the hardest and why. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've ever faced a similar crossroads, we'd love to hear how you handled it.